What springs to mind when you see this word, media? What was the last piece of news you heard? Have you ever fallen for media lies? I bet you have. Have you detected media bias recently? And what do you do to get at the truth? Hello and welcome to English for a Better World. Well, in this video, I want to look critically at how the media, especially mainstream media, function in ways that reinforce and affirm the existing power structure, or in other words, the dominant ideology. Spinning the narrative. Let's begin with this image. Describe what you see in it. Well, obviously, it's the same event with two different perspectives. Now, the question is whose perspective resonates with you and why? And who gets to decide when to call the same event terrorism and when to call it militarism? So, for instance, when America backed the Afghan Mujahideen or the Taliban in their fight against the former Soviet Union, the then President of America, Ronald Reagan, hosted them in the White House and called them freedom fighters.
Recently, we had number 6 of the Afghanistan freedom fighters. There's a man here whose wife was killed in front of their 2 children.
But when this same group turned against America, they were labeled terrorists. Well, this is a really good example of how the media manipulate our perception of what's going on in the world. We are constantly bombarded with media messages that are mediated by ideology, and I would say dominant ideology. Because of that, we really need to look at everything critically, question all the messages we receive on a daily basis. One helpful way to do that is by asking this question: who says what in which channel to whom with what effect? So if you look at the same image again, who created that message? And in which channel, the medium? And of course, to whom? We're talking about the receiver, the audience, the targeted audience. Well, in the case of mainstream media, American mainstream media, the targeted audience are American public. And the last question is, with what effect or for what purpose? And obviously, it's for this purpose, to get people to obey, conform, consume, stay asleep, and not to question the dominant narrative. Now let's consider how the media influence public opinion. Well, the first view says, what country are you from? Are you proud to be, just put in your country here. Propaganda influence your decision. Is your country at war? Are the people your country is killing bad people? Propaganda. Do you vote? Propaganda told you to. It makes you feel like you are important. You are not. All the choices you have when you vote are for the same ideology. It makes no difference who wins. And look at the mainstream media, CNN, Fox News. They, all of them, represent the same ideology, the dominant ideology, or to be more precise, the ideology of the group of people in power: white, rich, male, and now, of course, some female as well. Now let's look at this perspective. The public is affected by the media because we have become too lazy to read, and unfortunately that is correct. Even though we know that everyone is biased in one way or another, we tend to find the media source that agrees with our politics the most and listen faithfully. We have allowed it to monopolize our conversations and decide what is politically correct and what is not. So, what about you guys? Why don't you weigh in on this debate? How do you think the media affect the way we look at the world? Now, food for thought. Let's reflect on some of these quotes to find out more about who actually controls the media. Obviously, the top 1% wants everything. So the mass media is an extension of the elite power structure, corporations. What we have right now is corporate controlled media. And obviously, they serve the interests of the corporations, the 1%. Occupy propaganda. We need to do that. Propaganda is to a democracy what the bludgeon is to a totalitarian state. Well, Chomsky is spot on here because in a democracy, you need propaganda to create the illusion that you are free while you're not. Well, American mass media have achieved what American political might could not, world domination. Well, obviously, this is also true. Just look at whose values have become dominant in the world today. Obviously, not African values, not Ubuntu. It's all about winner takes all, money, money, get rich, and American dream should be called nightmare. And the last quote, the media have the power to make the guilty innocent and the innocent guilty. Malcolm X. And Malcolm X is also spot on because just take a look at what's happening in Palestine to get an idea of what he's talking about. Well, obviously it's an occupation, but it's often talked about as conflict. It's framed as a conflict, and it's not. It's an occupation. Well, reflect on these quotes, guys, and share your thoughts with us. Now listen to a few people discussing the media in their countries. But first, let's consider this expression. He who pays the piper calls the tune. And I think the expression tells you a lot about who gets to decide the agenda, who sets the agenda for any particular media outlet. Okay, so now go ahead and listen. How objective is the media in your country?
Well, unfortunately, in my country, media is used as a means of propaganda and indoctrination of, regimes, teaching rather than, they would claim it is, religious, particularly Islam's teaching, but I would call it the regime's teaching. So it is used as a means to their end.
Frankly, my country, considering United States, it's one of the best places in the world for in forms of media because any person, so yes, you have the state-run media, the Fox studios, but any person can become a form of media and they could have their own studio, even such a simple factor as a camera in your own home that is broadcasted to the world. Anybody could express their opinion. Okay, it might be limited to the number of viewers that you attract to yourself, but anybody with any idea could express themselves to the world.
Well, but in your country, the media management is so well established that I guess these little cameras, or homemade videos, play very little role. I don't say they don't play any role, but they are not that much effective. They most of the time they fail to gain momentum in what they are fighting for.
A recent report found something very interesting, that Fox viewers are the most misinformed viewers. Actually, even more misinformed than people who never watch TV. So people who watch Fox News or mainstream media know much less about what's going on in the world than people who never watch, which is quite shocking when you think of it.
Thanks to the management.
Yes.
But we also have newspapers and such as the Christian Science Monitor, which in reality, maybe out of the entire newspaper, one article is religious. The rest of it gives you a different perspective. It's the people that decide what they want to watch.
The objectivity of the media in my country is usually dependent on the subject matter which is being talked about. subjects that are not particularly sensitive may most likely be objectively reported. Sensitive top subjects, on the other hand, tend to be presented in a biased way. But all in all, in my country, it is generally the fact that we don't have a powerful census and a government that is very mindful of playing a role in the influence of its own people, has left the people with quite an open hand, so that the media's objectivity or lack of it is usually more dependent on the journalists, the values and the discipline and the integrity of the journalists, rather than the other way around.
I'd like to add to it that satellite TVs have helped people, because you do not have one state local run TV to tell you the news that you need to hear to be just their opinion. Now you have unlimited choices.
Can I say something? They are as biased as state-run media, simply because they are corporate-controlled media. There are three forms of media. State-run media, which is absolutely biased. I mean, there's no question about it. However, their bias is quite obvious, unlike corporate media, where bias is quite subtle. You don't see it. You have to detect it. And then you have the independent media. Okay. Now, what makes media independent, state or corporate run, is actually about the funding, the source of funding. As the saying goes, he who pays the piper calls the tune, right? So independent media is viewer funded.